The rock legend Joe Strummer has died of a heart attack at the age of 50. He was lead singer of The Clash, widely regarded as the best of all the punk bands. Among their hits were London Calling, Rock the Casbah and Should I Stay or Should I Go? David Silito looks at the life and music of one of the great voices of rock.
Joe Strummer. He was the passionate and intelligent voice of punk. The Clash were famous for their energy, their politics, and their part in shaking up the music scene in the 1970s.
Punk really came about because the progressive groups had come to the end of their idea, and music had become very boring. That's really why punk came about.
Of course, the anti-establishment band that once sang "I'm so bored with the USA" ended up being hugely successful in the States before eventually falling apart. But their influence was huge. The Jam, U2, the Manic Street Preachers all looked to them as a symbol of what music could be. But while the band was linked to the estates of West London, Joe Strummer was educated in Surrey. Born John Mellor, he was the son of a diplomat, but those who knew him didn't doubt either his sincerity about his music or his politics.
It was really the main reason why he was up there on the stage, to get this message across. And I would go out to interview him, and he would insist that I would come back the next day. And sometimes interviews could go on for as long as 3 days before Joe would finally run out of ideas.
Joe Strummer never stopped performing, but he would never recapture what he and his bandmates had found with The Clash. He was intelligent, a musical innovator, but more than anything, a man who proved an exciting band could have a message.
Joe Strummer, who's died of a heart attack at the age of 50, and we're joined by Sir Bob Geldof. Bob, thanks for standing in that very cold field waiting to talk to us. Now, punk music has gone, but Joe Strummer's reputation will live on. Why do you think he was important?
Well, if you think that punk music was important, and I absolutely believe it was, and necessary, it wouldn't have been so important had Joe Strummer not existed. As your report said, he had a clear and palpable intelligence, and he lent to the entire attitude. It was an attitude far more than it was a movement or maybe even a music. He lent to it a sort of polemical ability, which it didn't really have with the sort of incoherent nihilism, let's say, of the Pistols or the music itself. And he gave it a sort of political agenda. And he was also able to, in a bizarre way, blend all those socially active forces in Britain in the late 70s, when the economy seemed to be running into a brick wall. There was newer waves of immigrants from the West Indies, and incorporating their music and indeed the sort of the primal sort of element of that West Indian music into an older rock form, which the Clash sort of reinvented and re-energized again. So they were very important musically, but as a person, he was a very nice man, because here we were these bunch of sort of hicks, or at least that's the way they viewed my band, the Boomtown Rats. And it was a very closed London scene, but Johnny Rotten welcomed us, maybe because he was Irish, I guess, but more so Strummer did as well. And we'd sit down and argue a lot, because I found a lot of the sort of attitudinizing a bit much. But he wouldn't let me get away with that. He'd argue and argue. We may not have agreed on a lot, but it was good times. It was good times for that sort of argument. Though having said that, we were intense rivals in terms of trying to sell records and stuff like that. But they were one of the great rock bands, be under no illusion.
What will you miss most about him? Because he's died very young, hasn't he?
His honesty is really a thing that's vitally necessary in pop music, in popular culture indeed. And I'd cite the fact that the Clash actually did believe the things they said. And when they broke up, and I know for a fact that they were offered huge amounts of money to go on and be one of the sort of giant rock bands, and they declined. And they were offered even greater amounts of money when money was pretty scarce on the ground for Joe and Mick, the guitar player, and the others, and Paul. And they were offered a vast amounts, and they just said, no, that isn't really what we stood for. And that is truly admirable. And I bumped into Mick Jones, his sidekick, the one who wrote the songs with him, about 3 days ago, doing Christmas shopping with his daughter. And he was another very nice guy. And, you know, as we all got older and saw each other more and liked each other more, I in turn respected them more retrospectively, simply because they actually did mean what they said. Very rare.
Bob, thank you very much for talking to us, and happy